Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition and the Asus Transformer Book TF100. Now both of these tablets are fairly new and close in price. We're looking at $400 for the 64 gigabyte tablet on the left, and the Samsung on the right ranges from $550 to $600. So obviously a considerable premium for the Samsung, but that's because there is a considerable premium with regard to hardware. Now keep in mind, one is running Android Jelly Bean, a mobile operating system, whereas on the left the Asus is running Windows 8.1. Now this is a 32-bit, not 64-bit version, nor is it a Pro version, but nonetheless a full operating system that can run true programs, full-blown applications, not mobile ones designed for mobile platforms. So very different devices in terms of what they represent, in terms of limitations of what you can do. But I think they are going to garner comparisons simply because of price point. And quite frankly, they both have 10.1-inch displays, although the Asus has a 1366 by 768 IPS display, which I'm actually impressed with. Certainly quite washed out when compared to the Samsung 2560 by 1600 resolution clear type display, which is really best in class, and you're paying for it in the price point, among many other things. They are very similar when it comes to, I think, the target or the heart of the audience in terms of what they're looking to accomplish. This is all about productivity, multitasking, and even though one is a Windows machine and the other is just a mobile Android tablet, I think they do appeal to students and mobile professionals alike. Now, if you need a full Windows environment, I think this is just about your best option in the market right now if you can get a unit that has proper quality control. And by that I mean out of the box, I had no dead pixels, relatively zero almost light bleed, and that's hard to come by from Asus or any manufacturer. The same can be said for the Samsung, but again, a very big price gap between the two, even though they're both 10.1-inch tablets. Another thing to point out is that when we talk about processors, here in the Intel-driven 8.1 machine, we do have a quad-core chip now. We're dealing with Bay Trail. It is significantly faster than the previous generation. Intel's touting it as twice the performance, and I can see that. I mean, when we're web browsing on this machine, it's really right there with just about everybody else in the business. So when I think of traditional performance from high-end Android tablets, as well as iOS for that matter, I'm going to include the iPad, this thing comes pretty close, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is a full-blown computer. Granted, it's more netbook-esque because we're being driven by an Atom chip. The point is, this is the best mobile Atom chip to date, and it does come through on performance. So whether we're web browsing, dealing with flash video, whatever it is, you could easily argue that this is going to deliver in a way that both Apple and Android offerings are going to just flat out fail. And I'm not going to make a case against this. By the way, this is not a physical button. You have to actually use the physical button on the left side. Initially, when I got the Transformer book, I thought that this, like most Windows 8.1 machines, would be a physical button that would act as your Windows button, but it's not. There is an actual physical button on the left-hand side below the volume rocker. So web browsing, media consumption, going through all the content you could possibly want, but not having to worry about the limitations of a mobile tablet ecosystem, or I should just say the operating system itself, is the beauty of a machine, or brought to you by the machine that we're looking at here in the Transformer book. But quality control is an issue. I've read a lot of complaints, not just about the tablet itself. It is an all-plastic construction, by the way, granted, as is the Samsung for the most part, if not all. But it also does come with a keyboard dock, and that is a great value. That's another reason why I really wouldn't necessarily compare these, but again, the price point and the fact that they're both 10.1-inch tablets is going to draw some comparison, and they're both, as I mentioned before, aimed at students, really. You do, with that included keyboard, which I have right here, you also get, really, besides getting a complete now experience of having a clamshell computing experience between the touchpad and I think this is like a 92% keyboard, so you're almost there at a full-size keyboard. It will take a little time to get accustomed to, but you also get a full-size USB port right there, which is 3.0. So another great added bonus you're not going to find on the Note 2010, or excuse me, Note 10 2014. And it's a clean design. It doesn't exactly match on the color, which I've noticed, and there's even a different finish. We've got like a brushed aluminum finish, even though it's plastic, which I would have much preferred to see on the back of this tablet. They went for a high gloss finish instead. But the whole beauty is that this tablet will just dock. There's that high gloss fingerprint magnet, which is actually reminiscent to Samsung's phones, ironically enough, prior to the redesign on the back end. But it's easy as, pie, just plugging it in, and you've got your hybrid convertible experience instantaneously. Now, no additional battery, no backlight on the keys for that keyboard, so that's something I think a lot of us would have liked to have seen, but you've got to keep in mind, this is a $400 tablet. And then anytime you want, you can jump right to your desktop experience, and you're back in a traditional Windows environment, not the tablet mode that I was just playing around with. And I think that's, again, the biggest draw to this device, is that the only compromise is that you are dealing with limited storage, in that you can pick this up in either 32 or 64 gig capacity, which after Windows 8.1 is installed is considerably less, as you can imagine. It's more than halved. So that's something to be said for that. And then beyond that, 2 gigs of RAM. In the Note, which I'll be getting to in a second, we actually have 3 gigs of RAM. Granted, they're driving different application types because of their operating system differences, but that's something that is noteworthy, especially since quad-core processors are driving both of these experiences. There are actually 2 quad-core chips in the Note. Only one front-facing camera here on the Asus, which is serviceable. It's really nothing special, but considering the price you're paying, again, and I'll reiterate that, it's an added value. No rear camera on this, but I didn't point out, which I want to, you do also have, and this is part of, again, what makes it comparable to all of those other tablets on the market, this is something where really Windows 8 tablets couldn't necessarily compete last generation, simply because the dual-core Atom chips that they were all driven by were simply garbage, and this year Bay Trail is the difference maker, not because it's blowing things out of the water, but just because it isn't that slug of a performer that last gen was. We have a micro SD card slot for storage expansion. We have micro HDMI out, as well as a micro USB port for charging and transfer. That is what you'll still be using for charging while docked in the keyboard dock, as well as a dual mic and headphone jack right there, 3.5 millimeter. On the other side of the tablet, we've got our volume rocker, as well as that physical Windows button that'll flip you in and out of the tablet and actual desktop mode. And then on the top of the machine, we have a microphone right there, as well as our power button. It also has an LED notification light. And that is pretty much it. The connection port on the bottom for connecting to the dock right there, as well as the actual brackets. So that pretty much rounds out the design. There are very loud stereo speakers on the back. You can see them imprinted, those little grills, the pinholes. Nothing new. That is an Asus design on pretty much all of the Transformers. And overall, I'm really impressed with this tablet so far. I have done an update video on it. I'm blown away by what they've been able to put together for $400. And in some instances, it's already been discounted. I know Micro Center ran something for $350 when it first launched for the 64 gig version. So that was a great value. So a lot to like in this device. And if you need Windows 8.1 at the least expensive entry point, with an included keyboard and great battery life, that's one thing I didn't mention. We still retain the same great battery life from the first generation Windows 8 tablets, even though we've doubled our performance. And boy, does it come through with multitasking. It's really not comparable to what we had last year. It almost starts to make the argument for a lot of people considering this over something like Surface Pro and Pro 2. Granted, that's an i5 Haswell chip that is incredibly more powerful than what you get here. But for the average consumer, I'm not sure they're going to leverage all of that power they get with Haswell. But I'm not getting into that today. Let's talk about what the Note 10.1 brings. So a considerable premium. We're going from $400 to $550 just to get the 16 gigabyte model. Whereas here with the Asus, again, they were $32 and $64 respectively, $350 and $400. So here in the Samsung, 16 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes of internal storage. You also, of course, have a micro SD card slot for storage expansion, much like the Asus. That's one of the things they share in common. But we're running on Jelly Bean, Android operating system. This isn't going to give you the ability to run a Flash browser like you could with the Transformer Book. You're not going to be able to run Windows applications. So this is not a computer, but you can make a very strong argument that it's as close to a computer as you could possibly get in a tablet form. And that's because, first and foremost, it has the hardware just about to match a computer. Granted, this is an ARM-based chip, but Intel is now starting to make their own ARM chips. So that should really tell you what you need to know about where computing is going. So we have two quad-core chips in here, which does add up to an octa processor experience, which is unmatched in any device right now in the market. So we have an Exynos A5, which is Samsung's very own best-in-class mobile processor. And then for lower-powered applications, we've got an A7 quad-core chip, older architecture, that is really all about balancing out battery life and performance for when you need it. So, don't bring out the big guns for when you don't need them. Tremendous battery life here, much like you have in the Transformer. You're looking at a full day of battery life, anywhere from, I would say, depending on your tasks, and this is for both tablets, roughly 8 to 10 hours depending on what you're doing. So that's really impressive battery life, especially considering here we've got a 2560 by 1600 resolution clear type display, which of course does blow this IPS lower res display out of the water, but this IPS display on the Transformer is still very solid. It's just that when you see them side by side, it's going to be tough to want a device like the Transformer unless you absolutely must have the Transformer experience and Windows 8.1. By the way, I forgot to mention Office does come included. That's another big key difference between these two devices. No Office here. We've got a lot of substitutes, that you can choose from. Included in the tablet out of the box, you do get Polaris Office 5, a full version, which is your basic equivalent, but it's still not Office. And if you really require Office, you're not going to get it here on this platform. But you will get just about everything else you could possibly want. S Pen integration, something vacant from the Transformer, is going to redefine the way you use this tablet. Arguably for many, it may actually be more useful than having a keyboard. After all, if you want a device with a keyboard, I can make a clear argument for going ahead and picking up a real Ultrabook rather than a tablet that tries to do both. Because most devices that try to double as both, really, as good as they can be, and this I mentioned in my Surface Pro 2 review, they end up falling short at being the best of both worlds simply because it's just too tough to pull off. Even the best compromise is still a compromise. So with that said, from a tablet perspective, what you're getting here is really unmatched. The processors I mentioned, best in class. Screen, best in class. 3 gigs of RAM. Of course, GPS, dual band Wi-Fi, which by the way also supports AC. That's another thing you're not going to get with the Transformer. Not that that's shocking. Again, it's a budget device. This is a premium device. But you also get an infrared remote control here. You have front and rear cameras that are much higher quality than the front camera found on the Transformer Book. You get your scrapbook capabilities. Air Command allows you to multitask using pen windows to bring up applications. Your S Finder is going to allow you to basically have quick, easy search access to everything on the tablet. I mean, this is the ecosystem you're getting from the TouchWiz UI that Samsung has custom designed for this platform, for Jelly Bean and for the Note experience. So it's really a matter of whether or not you want the Wacom digitizer, you want the S Pen, you want all of the note-taking capability that's now been taken to the next level of being integrated into your tablet experience through hypertext links and actions rather than just being a note-taking device. So that's where this device really shines. Everything you throw at it, it's going to spit out. It's not going to have problems with anything, or I should say it's going to chew it up. I just inverted that one. It really just flies, and that's because you've got an incredible processor complemented by some of the best mobile software out there in the marketplace. And this will get an upgrade to KitKat. Samsung's been very aggressive with software updates, which is a good thing. Web browsing on here is a breeze. Just works as it should. And whatever you really want to do with it, it's going to perform well. Now, if you're looking for a flash experience, then I'm going to always recommend that you're better off going with a Windows 8 experience, 8.1 now, than Android, or forget about the Fruit Company. So that's really obvious. And you can see things are smooth, no flash. That's a big difference between this and the Transformer that lost its poor little backlight there in the mix of things while I've been talking about the Note. But really, in terms of hardware, the fact that now we're dealing with quad-core in both, we've got the same form factor, same weight class. This is a little bit thinner. Build quality definitely better in the Samsung, no question about it, even though they're very similar in form factor. A lot more bezel in the Asus, which I think will turn some people off, but Asus is already kind of known for that. Plus, again, you have to take into account how inexpensive this is. Going around the tablet, physical buttons here, I do like that, not eating into screen real estate. That's not something you have to worry about here, but that is with most Android-driven devices. Your micro USB port there at the center bottom for charging, as well as a microphone pinhole. Left side, we've got a speaker grill, as well as our dual function headphone and microphone jack, 3.5 millimeter, of course. Power button and volume rocker right there on the top left of the device, even though I've got it on the right side right now. We then have our infrared port for Samsung's infrared remote control feature, which I will be demoing in another video. Our rear camera with LED flash, and then of course the S Pen holder on the right side of the tablet, another stereo speaker grill, and the micro SD card slot. Now, one thing I want to point out about this is that build quality, which is something I mentioned before about the Asus tablet, is something that needs to be noted here with the Samsung as well, because even though the Samsung is a much more expensive tablet and in my opinion aesthetically much nicer looking, it is predominantly plastic. Samsung claims that the frame is made of some sort of metal, but I can't really verify that based on at least what I've experienced or what it feels like. But what I can tell you without any question at all is that despite the fact that these are both built predominantly with plastics, polycarbonates, the Samsung does have much better build quality, even in the way it actually physically feels, despite at least my version's loose speaker grills. So overall, these are very different devices. That comes without question because of the fact they're running different operating systems. But again, I know a lot of you out there are going to be intrigued by the price point, the value that the Asus represents. But to me, it should be really clear to you right out of the gate that if you want the best Android tablet in the market, you're looking at it here right now in the Note 10.1 2014 edition. If you're looking for a budget, entry-level Windows 8.1 convertible experience that's going to give you a 1.2 pound tablet, 2.4 pound convertible clamshell, really trying to give you the best of both worlds. And by the way, the least expensive Bay Trail offering right now, and in my opinion, one of the best, even though many more are coming out now from Dell and pretty much every manufacturer you can imagine. I think you're relatively safe with the Asus. So what you can really take away from this comparison is that both of these are very solid choices, despite whichever one you go with. Granted, I've read some terrible things about the quality control on the Transformer Book. As long as you make sure that you can, purchase it with a retailer that has a reputable return policy, and by reputable I mean they're not going to make you keep a defective product, then you should be okay, because you should be able to find one. with that said, the Samsung's not perfect either. I know plenty of people that have gone through several units trying to find one that doesn't have loose speaker grills or necessarily little chips in the silver finish, all sorts of different things. So no device is perfect. The price difference here really just equates to you are getting, in my opinion, substantially better hardware here, but many would argue that that's hampered by the fact that it's running, on an Android platform, whereas with Windows 8.1, you really are only limited by the hardware capabilities. Your photo editing, video editing, you're not going to be in love with the experience here because it's driven by an Atom processor, even if it is the brand new Bay Trail quad-core architecture, which, as I mentioned, is twice as fast. You're still going to feel it. But when it comes to web browsing, the Office suite being included here, I think the value is compelling for students specifically. I see this going to classrooms without a hesitation. It really shouldn't be something to even think about because you can't find anything else like it. And in terms of it replacing the netbook, not only does it replace it, it kills it. It abolishes it in every form and fashion because now you have so much more versatility, flexibility, and a machine that comes in at a price point that makes mobile tablets of all sorts look expensive, quite frankly, because for $400, you can't even pick up Asus's very own new transformer, the TF701, which I'll be covering, which you'd have to pay additional for the keyboard dock, but of course that includes extended battery life, as well as an SD card, a full-size SD card slot, among many other things. But in my opinion, both of these tablets are great because one is a Windows-based machine, full Windows. I want to reiterate that, even though it's 32-bit, compared to an Android Jelly Bean-driven device. Doesn't mean, of course, that they are directly comparable in terms of what you're going to get out of them, but I think for most people who are looking to be able to use these as productivity machines, it's really going to come down to whether or not you need that S Pen. If you need a Wacom digitizer, you should be going with this tablet. But if you need to be able to run Windows applications that you can't run on the Android platform, then quite frankly, obviously the S Pen isn't on your short list. And that's where something like the TF100 is just a gem of a device at its price point. But overall, I like both of these devices. They offer great performance, great battery life, and really just still kind of in shock about what Asus has been able to pull off at this $400 price point. Samsung, on the other hand, delivering in just about every form and fashion, but you certainly are paying to have this luxury experience. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.